special report.
Good afternoon, I'm Tom Yamas. We interrupt programming to bring you this ABC News special report. President Trump is about to speak right now inside of the White House. We expect him to address the deadly hate rally in Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend. Let's listen in.
Optimistic than ever before. Companies are moving back to the United States and bringing many thousands of jobs with them. We have already created over 1 million jobs since I took office. We will be discussing economic issues in greater detail later this afternoon, but based on the events that took place over the weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, I would like to provide the nation with an update on the ongoing federal response to the horrific attack and violence that was witnessed by everyone. I just met with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the deadly car attack that killed one innocent American and wounded 20 others. To anyone who acted criminally in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag. And we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs. We must love each other. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. We are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America. 2 days ago, a young American woman, Heather Heyer, was tragically killed. Her death fills us with grief, and we send her family our thoughts, our prayers, and our love. We also mourn the 2 Virginia state troopers who died in service to their community, their commonwealth, and their country. Troopers Jay Cullen and Burke Bates exemplify the very best of America, and our hearts go out to their families, their friends, and every member of American law enforcement. These 3 fallen Americans embody the goodness and decency of our nation. In times such as these, America has always shown its true character, responding to hate with love, division with unity, and violence with an unwavering resolve for justice. As a candidate, I promise to restore law and order to our country, and our federal law enforcement agencies are following through on that pledge. We will spare no resource in fighting so that every American child can grow up free from violence and fear. We will defend and protect the sacred rights of all Americans, and we will work together so that every citizen in this blessed land is free to follow their dreams in their hearts and to express the love and joy in their souls. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
We've just been listening to President Trump there in the White House with a much more forceful response to that hate rally attack in Charlottesville, Virginia. No doubt bowing to some of the political pressure that has happened since Saturday, when his first statement was met with so much criticism because his own Republicans even said he had not gone far enough. And it was interesting. He used the same phrase that he had used Saturday, but he took out a very important section. He said, "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence," but he left out the 2 or 4 words, I should say, the 2 phrases that got him out on many, many sides. I want to bring in Cecilia Vega now for her take on this response. And Cecilia, you know, his own Republican senators, his vice president, his attorney general, even his own daughter came out so strong after that deadly hate rally and called out the neo-Nazis, called out these white supremacists. They went so much further than the president did up until this point.
Yeah, Tom, the president was essentially forced to come out today to make these comments to the American public. And some of the words that he used, he did not hold back. He said, quote, "Racism is evil." He listed these groups that so much of the American public wanted him to say outright. Those names, neo-Nazis, KKK, other hate groups, he said, that are repugnant. We will spare no resource, he says. And I do want to remind our viewers that the president did start by saying that they have now opened a civil rights investigation into what happened in Charlottesville. But look, Tom, the president didn't have a choice here today. He came back from his vacation in Bedminster to that White House. He just arrived there not long ago and walked to that microphone in front of the cameras to make this public comment. It took him 3 days to get here, though, under the full fire of his allies, not just Republicans, Tom, allies in his own party, supporters of his president. And there was near universal outrage. The days that followed, there were conflicting statements from the White House and they tried to clarify what he'd been saying. He had no choice, Tom, but to come out here and make this statement today.
But as we both know, Cecilia, you know, this is a president who does not like to apologize. He didn't apologize here. He never likes to admit a mistake. But the problem he had politically is a lot of these groups and the so-called alt-right, these white supremacist group that we've actually been looking at for 6 months, a lot of them have felt emboldened by the Trump campaign and now the Trump presidency. And some of them even found a victory in what he said Saturday, since the president seemed to blame both sides for all that violence when really it was only one side that ended up killing somebody on Saturday.
Yeah, you know, some of these groups this morning on the internet have some very ugly things, saying that because the president early on did not outright denounce them, they are finding victory in that. And I can tell you, the president's silence over the last few days was word enough for many people in this country. Communities of color especially will see his silence on this and refusing to name these names as speaking directly to those groups. This is a president that, by all accounts, have tiptoed around the issue of white nationalist support of his campaign. And I think that a lot of people will view this delayed response to what has happened in Charlottesville as yet another example of President Trump tiptoeing around this issue again.
I want to bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, as well. Pierre, we know that just before he came out and spoke in the White House just now, he met with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He also met with the new FBI director, and they've announced this new civil rights investigation. What do you think those 2 top advisors told him just before he came out?
Well, Tom, the facts are pretty damning so far. The young man so far charged in this case with second-degree murder of that young woman. The information about his background is starting to come in. A teacher that he had in high school described him as a person who idolized Adolf Hitler. People described him going on a trip to Europe with high school classmates, going to Germany, going through a concentration camp, and allegedly uttering the words, "This is where the magic started." So the information coming in suggests that this may have been racially motivated. And again, even though there was violence on a number of sides during that event on Saturday, the fact of the matter is that the Nazis and the KKK and the white nationalists and supremacists who were there have a known track record of fomenting violence and hatred. And it's clear that the person who's been charged had those kind of leanings based on the reporting that we've done so far, Tom.
And Pierre, a lot of these groups that we've spoken to over the last 6 months predicted that this was going to happen, that they say this is the worst that these fights have ever been, that there was going to be a so-called quote-unquote war, and it happened on Saturday. Our thanks to Pierre and to Cecilia for their reporting during this special report. We're going to have much more tonight on World News with David Muir. We now return to scheduled programming. I'm Tom Yamas in New York. Thanks for watching.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hi, everyone. Amna Nawaz here with continuing coverage of the latest remarks from President Trump in response, of course, to the events over the weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, the deadly events there. Mary Alice Parks, my colleague down in Washington, D.C., joins me live now. And Mary Alice, for many people, these were the words that we were waiting for President Trump to say, to actually list out the groups that he was condemning after sort of a milquetoast statement over the weekend. Do you think that what he said right now will quiet some of the criticism he's been getting since then?
I think it will definitely stop the political bleeding, but let's be fair, it is not radical to come out and denounce neo-Nazis. What it was radical was waiting this long to do so, and that's what his Republican colleagues thought, and that was why he was met with an absolute sort of wave of opposition, even from within his own party over the last 3 days.
You know, Mary Alice, one of the other things that's happened since his failure to condemn some of these groups by name and some of the increasing political pressure, as you mentioned, was he's seen pressure from other sides too, right? The CEO of Merck, who is African American, actually came out and resigned in protest to the president's lack of response from a federal advisory panel, basically saying that if we can't stand up against bigotry and hatred, what do we stand for anymore? Do we know that and the potential for more people like that to step away and distance themselves from the president played any role in pressuring Mr. Trump today?
I think absolutely, and also members of his own team. You saw the vice president, his own daughter, a number of people very close to him making a point of using that strong, much more stern and direct language, breaking from the president in this. I think there's no doubt that had he not made a statement like this, it would have the fervor and the questions and the headlines about it would have only continued. Again, I think this was a statement needed to just stop the bleeding.
Let's bring in now our colleague Pierre Thomas, ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent. Pierre, we heard a little bit of news there that the Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the deadly attack in which one young woman was killed. What exactly does that entail, and what kind of message do you think the administration is trying to send here?
Well, what that means is that the FBI is now full bore on the case of looking into this young man's background to try to determine motive. Does he have ties to white supremacist groups? Does he have ties to neo-Nazis? Some of the early reporting that's gone on so far suggests from a high school teacher that he idolized Adolf Hitler, believed in the Nazi propaganda, believed in white supremacy. There are classmates of his who are talking about a trip to Europe in which they went to Germany, went to concentration camps allegedly, where he allegedly said something about this is where the magic started. So that part of the investigation is going to be critical because they will look at his background. They will do a search of phones and computers. They will talk to associates. They'll try to get a sense of, did he show up? If, in fact, he is the culprit, the suspect, the person who did this heinous act, did he do it at the behest of someone, or was this a spur-of-the-moment act of opportunity?
Pierre, I got to ask you, because one of the consistent criticisms of this president has been time and again when the opportunity comes to speak out against these specific kinds of groups, far-right extremist groups represented by white nationalists, white supremacists, the KKK, neo-Nazis here in America. He doesn't speak out as forcefully as most people would expect him to right away. At the same time, and the people I've interviewed who track hate in America say we've seen a rise in membership and an interest in some of these groups. From the folks you talk to in law enforcement, is that something that they're concerned about, that they've actually seen real evidence of?
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center tracks hate groups in this country, and they have data that shows that since 2000 there's been a 52% increase in the number of such hate groups, roughly 600 or so in 2000. Now we're up to well over 900. So that is of concern. Law enforcement is aware of these kinds of groups. And again, you don't have to look up much history to find out what the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists are about. And even though fists and and punches were thrown on a number of sides during that protests and counter-protests on Saturday in Charlottesville. Make no mistake, the people who have fomented that kind of violence and who are known for it, many of those people showed up in helmets, had sticks to beat people, so it was apparent that they came for a fight.
Our thanks to Pierre Thomas, live in Washington. Thanks, Pierre. For those of you just joining us, President Trump has delivered updated remarks in response to the deadly attack in Charlottesville over the weekend. In case you missed it, here is what the president had to say in regards to some of the groups that incited the violence in the first place. Let's take a listen.
We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
My colleague Mary Alice Parks joins me live in Washington now. And Mary Alice, those were the words a lot of people were waiting to hear. As you mentioned, it's nothing radical to call out white supremacists in America in 2017. But let's back it up just a little bit here. I mean, these were groups that showed up, as Pierre had mentioned, with torches in hand, anti-Semitic signs, Trump campaign signs in some cases, chanting Nazi slogans. And then for 3 days, they heard nothing from the president that said that they did anything wrong necessarily. Though the president has now come out and said the words everyone thought he would say 3 days ago, do you think that the silence in those last 3 days sends a message?
Absolutely. We know that hate groups have felt emboldened in this country in the last few years. Like you were talking about with Pierre, there's a rise in hate crimes in this country, a rise in hate groups, and they will continue to feel emboldened unless leaders and society tells them that it's not okay. The last 3 days were the silence from the White House, the silence from the commander-in-chief was absolutely deafening and spoke volumes. I think that we saw many of those radicals, those extremists, those white nationalists feel empowered by the lack of condemnation from this president. You know, I think it was interesting, two things that the president did not say today. He did not specifically call the act an act of domestic terrorism, though his own attorney general said that it felt like it met the definition of an act of domestic terrorism. I think that a lot of people watching that footage see a very, very direct act of violence. So that was surprising to me. He did not use that language. And he also did not say, I don't want your support. You know, it was very interesting to watch those protesters, those extremists there in Charlottesville. They did not mince words about which politician they were backing. We saw David Duke, a former KKK head, saying that he was there present to fulfill the promise of this president. They feel like they are aligned with this president. We have seen other Republicans in the past make a point of saying they don't want the support of white extremists and nationalists like this. We did not see that from this president.
Mary Alice, you mentioned other Republicans, and we believe that part of the reason the president felt a need to come out and clarify his response was part of that political pressure, right? His own party's leadership speaking out almost against their president, saying this didn't go far enough. This is not what our country is all about. This was not about partisan politics. This was members of his own party. Do we think that that will have any kind of lasting effect, or will this continue to come up again and again, as unfortunately we know these sort of issues now do?
You know, when you look at the president's past statements about minorities in this country, some of the comments he made during campaign rallies that got out of hand and borderline violent, this is an issue that will continue to dog this presidency unless he takes active steps to reverse course. I think you saw a very remarkable, quick backlash from members of his own party, like you said, not only standing up against these hate groups, but standing up against their own Republican president, calling him out specifically for not going far enough. You're right, we saw it from a number of Republican senators and congressmen across the country. This was clearly a seed change for them, and I don't think that these issues are going to go away anytime soon.
All right, our thanks to Mary Alice Parks down in D.C. Thanks, Mary Alice. Good to talk.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching as well. Remember, you can go to abcnews.com anytime for continuing coverage of this story and many others. For now, I'm Amna Navaz, and I'll see you back here soon.